So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for logging in, and sort of a different format this year than we've had in the past. If any of you have been, usually these are in person. Obviously, we're doing this via WebEx, so please bear with us as the technology is good, but again, it doesn't sort of allow for that free flowing conversation in the way that we have for in-person ones. So we will try to get as many questions covered as possible, but we'll try to do that at the end. But as questions come up, please feel free to put them into the chat, and we'll revisit those at the end. My name is Graham Smith. I am the chair of the Erie County Arts and Cultural Advisory Board. We had a board of 15, and we do the reviews for the applications themselves. In terms of agenda for today, we are, I'm going to do a little bit of an intro, which I'm sort of doing right now. I will pass it off to Dan Castle just briefly to talk about the county's bicentennial. Then we'll go through the 2021 sort of summary of what happened in the last funding year, and then start talking about the 2022, which there's some exciting new and hopefully easier to use aspects of the process. And then I will pass it on to Mary Ali. She'll do a live demo of the actual application itself. And then again, we'll try to address any questions at the closing. So again, thank you very much for joining us. Dan, I'm not sure if you wanted to speak a little bit, just briefly about the bicentennial.
Yeah, just a couple comments. I appreciate it. Thank you, Graham. What a year it's been, right? Who would have thought when we all got together at the Central Library a year ago that we would have a year like we have? And you know, it's been a challenge all the way around. And you know, appreciate all of the struggles that our arts and cultural organizations have been through the last year. You know, I know it's not been easy. It's taken a lot of adjusting, but you know, we at the county are committed to doing our part to fund these organizations through this period, and in the hopes and certainly the intent that we come out of this with culturals that are even stronger and learning from the situation that we're in. I can tell you that this whole arts and cultural program is a huge priority of both County Executive Mark Poloncarz and Legislative Chair Baskins. They're very committed to the funding, and I think the fact that the county, with all the financial struggles we had in 2020 and are still dealing with, that you know, the nearly $7 million of requests were honored, and we're continuing this program. So it speaks to how important the program is for the county and how important your work is for the community. We're looking ahead, and we'll spend most of tonight talking about the application process for 2022. But one thing I really wanted to touch on is this year, 2021 is Erie County's bicentennial. And it's kind of gotten lost in a lot of the noise over COVID and other priorities, but we are planning various programs. I know several arts and cultural groups are already looking at partnering or doing other events with the county. And we look forward to any opportunity that you guys have, your organizations have this year, that we can partner on bicentennial related events, recognizing the past, remembering the past, celebrating the future, and looking to the future. So the contact here is Jason Hurley, who's the lead in the county executive office. You can certainly reach out to Mary Ali or I as well. So I think we can move forward here. Mary Ali, if you want to go to the next slide. So I think most of you that have been through this process before are familiar with Art Services Inc. They are available to help you in your application and any related capacity building that you may need during the year, but certainly they're well versed in the application process. And in addition to any guidance and input you get tonight, you can certainly work with that organization to help craft your application. So I think with that, I will turn it back to, is it to you, Mary Ellie, or is it to you, Graham? I'm sorry.
I think it's to me. I think it's to me.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I'll catch. So yeah, I just to reiterate, I would agree that if you have any questions or concerns, or you're not sure about any sort of aspect, and you're or at least responding to the actual application itself, really that's ASI is a resource for that reason. So I would strongly urge you to reach out, and they offer programming throughout the year outside of certainly the application process for Erie County for arts and cultures in the community. So they're a great resource, and by all means, please use them. So before we get into 2022, which I know we're in 2021, but we're always funding a year ahead. So we just finished the 2021 funding year. And again, it was 2020, but again, sort of a crazy year. I think this time last year, we were sort of just under the radar of the pandemic, and we were able to have these again in person. And it did impact in some ways the process, not in terms of the reviews itself, but certainly at the funding level itself. So in 2021, the largest grants were the 5 largest grants are there on the screen. And I think a lot of times they sort of take all of the oxygen out of the room in some ways, or the big organizations. And again, speaking in this particular group who are going to be applying for some of the smaller funding applications, or we'll see some of the smaller funding applications, really want that to understand what the mean, the median, and the mode in terms of the grants themselves. So while we have some very large ones, the vast majority of them are somewhere, it's really in between. So while the average is $63,000, the median is just $9,200, and then the mode is $7,500. So the majority of the organizations that have received funding received $7,500 in that range. So again, it's 110 organizations last year received $6.95 million in county funding. And again, given a year where the pandemic really, I think, made things very difficult, both at the county level and I'm sure at your level as well, we were able to maintain, or the county was able to maintain that sort of funding level. I think is really speaks volumes to the value that the county sees in the arts and culture sector, really, for the county itself. And again, wanting to see those organizations do well, even despite the fact that, despite the pandemic itself. In terms of, if you could just move on, I'm sorry, Mary Ellie, I'm not sure if that, I'm not sure how to prompt. In terms of the funding cycle itself, again, typically we're releasing the actual application in February. This year it happened to be the beginning of March. And some of that is really, hopefully, you'll see when Mary Ellie actually reviews the new process for actually applying. So it's hopefully made that much easier, but that's why there's been a little bit of a delay in the release. But again, it was released yesterday for the first time. And then we have these applicant briefings. Obviously, this year you will be creating an account on the Erie County website in order to complete the application, because it's all going to be online this year. And then the county staff will review that, and if they have any questions or there's something missing, we'll reach out to each organization to make sure that they're there. Once the applications are received, and this year the due date for level 1, which again, this is what this particular briefing is for, is due on the 28th. So that's just a little over 7 weeks to actually complete the application, which is about the same as it was last year. Hopefully that is a positive, and that you have enough time. And again, hopefully that there's some time saving in the actual application process that, like I said, Mary Ellie will go over, that will help to speed things up as well. In terms of the reviewers, Once it comes back, we review that the application is complete. If not, we reach out, or Mary Alley really reaches out. We may request additional information once they've been reviewed, at least initially. If we have questions about something that's missing or something we don't understand, we will funnel those questions through the county, and the county will reach out to you to get them. Then we start really the review process itself. We distribute them out to individual board members. Sometimes we meet as in small groups. We certainly meet as a large group at the end, but sometimes we meet as small groups, particularly if there's a new board member who's just coming on about and learning the process. We try to have individual meetings with them so that they can really feel comfortable with the reviews that they're doing themselves. They take still a considerable amount of time because we really are reviewing literally everything that you're submitting. It's not being asked for no reason or just to fill in or check a box. We really are reviewing absolutely everything that is coming in. Then we make recommendations based on the reviews, and then those go to the DEP or Department of Environment and Planning at the county. I really sorry for using jargon. Once they're all received, then the department makes up their departmental budget, which is what this is a part of. It goes then to the county executive, and then any changes they see or feel like they should make, but typically it then goes into the legislative process, and then ultimately a budget is formed and approved of, usually in December of every year, and then it gets published, and letters go out to applicants for the process. I know we're not here for levels 2 and 3, but just so you're aware, levels 2 and 3 are a little bit more involved, and they have an additional week to submit their applications. We can move on. Just so you're aware, and this is on the website, but this is the board. I think we've got photographs for just about everywhere. We have one appointment on the board pending. We lost 2 board members due to term limits last year. And so we have one additional board member who's pending and should be coming on fairly soon. But just so you can sort of put a face to the Erie County Arts and Cultural Advisory Board. And then we're not the only ones who do reviews. There are actual staff members that do reviews as well, Erie County staff, and they are listed there at the bottom of the page. And Mary Alley, who's there as well, is the contact for the Arts and Cultural Board. If we can move on. Sorry. So what do we do? And I know this is sort of a slide that if you've been to one of these in the past, you'll probably have seen, but we in no way evaluate the art or the programming or the content that you're producing at your organizations. That is your forte. That is not ours. Although we do have members who are certainly familiar with the arts and have an arts background themselves, that is not a part of the review process in any way. We think all of the content that comes out is, I'm sure it's wonderful, but I would never, ever deign to think that I could in any way evaluate that. It really is a checkup on the organization itself. And in some ways, it's a free checkup for your organization, but it also, because it allows you to take a look at the governance documents that you've got, management and planning aspects of the organization, your fiscal health, the impact you're having on the community, the alignment of your programming with your mission. For the level ones, I don't believe county recognition is there, but recognizing the county's financial commitment to your organization, I think, is important. And then the ability to be equitable and diverse and inclusive in your work. We live in a very diverse county, and the programming and staffing and board level and outreach, all of those things should be reflective of the fact that we live in a diverse county. They're all independent reviews, so No one who has an affiliation with any organization would be reviewing anybody's application. And it really ideally leads to stronger organizations themselves. And again, the ideal is not that you're not receiving county funding anymore, but that you're able to go out and get funding from corporate sources and from other private sources and foundational sources that can help to grow your organization as well. So we don't just do the reviews as a sort of a way to determine whether organizations should receive funding. It is also really a check-in and a check-up on the organization itself. And then again, feedback letters go out to organizations where we try to underscore both the strengths and weaknesses, if any, that were in the application itself, and then suggest places to improve. And those suggestions really are looked at the following year too. So if there's a suggestion that you diversify your board, and then the next year there doesn't seem to be very much movement in that, that is actually somewhat telling, I think, for the organization. So we really are looking at previous year applications as well. We never review the same organization 2 years in a row. So whatever you reviewed last year, you're not necessarily reviewing, but that does not mean that individual reviewers aren't seeing applications from previous years to see if the suggestions that were in the feedback letters are actually being looked at, and effort is being made to improve those things. Move on. In 2022, again, sort of the big change, or the biggest change, I think, and especially if you've done this before, is that it's going to now be available as a web form, which means that there's no more fillable PDFs. There will be logic to the question. So if you're asked something and you're saying no to it, that might, in the paper version or in the online or in the previous versions, you still saw those additional questions. All of that drops out once you've sort of triggered the logic. You can save as a draft and then complete it before submitting it. So again, that's not something that was able to be done in the past. You have to sort of cut and paste it all into the application and then submit it all at once. So you don't have to do that any longer. You'll be able to navigate back and forth between completed sections. There are integrated uploads, and the financial worksheet that's required for each level will have the same content and can be submitted as a PDF. It will require you to get an account for your organization, and it's one account per organization. Even if you have multiple people working on the actual application, you just need to share the username and password for that for each of the people who are involved. And then the level of the request is established as a percentage of the applicant's fiscal year of 2019. So we recognize that because of the pandemic, 2020 was an extraordinary year, and a year really unlike hopefully any that we see going forward, and certainly unlike probably any you've had in the past. And so this year, the fiscal year will be based on 2019 actual budget because of the pandemic itself. If we can move on. In terms of the request structure, there are 3 levels, as we said before. This is level 1. And so the max grant for this app, if you fill out the level 1 application, is less than or equal to $50,000. And it's a max of less than or equal to 20% of your total budget. I don't know if this really applies for level 1s, but again, you can complete something for lower than your annual budget potentially. Some large organizations ask for less, lesser amounts, obviously. And so that this takes into account that. In terms of eligibility, you need to be located in Erie County. It seems sort of obvious for county funding. Even though you may have programming that happens outside of Erie County, the majority of it should be happening in Erie County. You need to be a 501c3 with tax exempt status for at least a year. And you must be able to provide a copy of your submitted IRS tax filings. And then you have to have one of the sort of definitions. I think it's sort of obvious what an arts organization is, but cultural, I think, can be mean different things to different people. And so I think that's the reason why the county has these sort of descriptions. This is the primary mission of the organization needs to meet these. One of these. And again, if there's some question, we would reach back out to you if we didn't feel that it met those. But I think they're fairly broad in their cultural concepts. And again, I really don't think that we've ever, that's ever happened at this point, or very rare occasions when there seems to be an organization that's outside of the arts and cultural mission of this funding stream. In terms of application levels, like I said, this is level 1. There are 3. Grants, again, can be no more than 50, or the requests can be no more than 50,000. For level 2, it's 50,000 up to 150,000, and then everything 150 or greater. While level 2 and level 3 on here, I'm really going to focus on level 1 because that's the point of this particular applicant briefing. Again, we ask that the request not exceed 20% of your budget. It's just sort of good best practices in terms of funding in arts, certainly at a public level. And then these are the following documents are really what you'll be required to provide. So obviously the application and the level 1 completed application, the annual report, the financial report, or the annual budget that you submit to New York State, and it's required by New York State law. A financial worksheet, again, that's for level 1 organizations, and we ask for more as you go up and as the request goes up. Your tax filing every year, so that is either your 990 if you file a 990 EZ or 990N. We want to see your bylaws. Again, those are part of New York State not-for-profit law, so we need to see those. We want to see both your whistleblower policy and your conflict of interest policy. And for the conflict of interest policy, not only do we want to see the policy, but we want to see signed disclosures from board members. And so those are the main things that are asked for as part of the application itself. Please remember that the grants are for general operating purposes. They cannot be used for capital programs or improvements, and they cannot be used to offset accounts receivable. And they should not be funding anything, obviously, that happens outside of Erie County. I think that goes without saying. But again, there are organizations that apply and are focused on Erie County or are located in Erie County, but do things outside of Erie County as well, which is absolutely fine. Again, just so long as the performance that the money's going towards is happening in Erie County or whatever it happens to be. Please also remember that the funding requests are not guaranteed. They will be reviewed for all of those things: governance, management, fiscal management, all of those things that I mentioned before. But there is no guarantee. Again, money for this is based on the county's budget. And again, knock on wood, we've had, at least my time and my tenure on the board, both as a board member and as chair, there has been funding for arts and culturals every year, but it is obviously not a guarantee. Again, that is by no means a way to dissuade anybody from submitting an application, obviously, but there just is no guarantee about the funding itself. So in terms of attachments, so for level 1, again, your annual financial report, again, it's required by the state of New York to submit. So that's the same thing that we're looking for. And so they're listed as what we're looking for anything that's under. It does not have to be CPA reviewed or audited, but it does need to be submitted. In terms of the financial worksheet, that's an Excel that you can be made into a PDF. It can be downloaded and completed as a PDF from the Erie.gov/cultural and is required for all levels. So that's one that is absolutely required. Again, your tax filing. We require the bylaws, and again, that's a copy of those should be completed. The conflict of interest policy, again, with the signed disclosures, and the whistleblower. And then an additional attachment. So you can submit additional information if you think that it will help us to understand something that's in the application that we might not otherwise, or there may not have been a place in the application for you to sort of explain something. So you can do that as well. It can be narrative, it can be whatever you want. And I would also argue that as a part of the application, at least for some of them anyway, you can, there are places where you can add different things into that. But I would argue that if you are going to submit something, submit it as an attachment if it is not easily done in the application itself. That was kind of quick, because I think we wanted to get to the demo, but like I said, any questions that you have about any of what we just covered, anything about the actual application, even if it's not for level 1, because we are here, and there will be other applicant briefings tomorrow and the day after for level 2 and 3. So if you have questions regarding those based on something that you saw, by all means, please ask those as well. But this is primarily, again, focused on level 1. Marielle will now go through a live demo of the new application and sort of how to go about submitting that. And I thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for logging in and bearing with us again, given everything that's going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. If you're having any issues hearing me, please say it in the chat. I will be trying to monitor that as we go through the demo. I'm going to switch screens now. Let's see. There we go. All right. So to do your application, you go to Erie.gov/cultural in case there's any new applicants, going all the way to the front. So at this point, you should have already requested your account, but if you haven't, you can just go to application, request an account. You put in your info here. We ask whether you're a 501c3 and whether you meet the definitions we just talked about. You can review them at this link here. And submit. That sends me an email. I then send it to IT. They make an account for you. And I know some people have had issues with the link. It's usually the lowest link on the email you get sent. However, you can try, it'll send you a username. It doesn't look like this one. It's usually the acronym to your organization. But you can go to reset your password and put in your username, and it'll send you the instructions again. It might be a little easier than trying to follow the links on the original email. So I am going to actually log in with my regular account that's just like yours. And I'm going to go into application. And here is information on this page, basically everything we went over. I do also have the links on here directly, but you can also find them on resources. So if you go to resources and come down, here's the financial worksheets. Here's the cash flow forecast, although you don't need it for level 1, the other levels need it. And if you are still kind of trying to figure out your conflict of interest policy or your whistleblower policy, you can find some templates here. Please do review these with your legal counsel before adopting any policy. We're not legal experts, but these are just compiled from some of the better policies we've seen, and also from the requirements that is listed in the nonprofit corporation law, which you can also kind of look at the minimum requirements right here. So in the actual application, I'm going to go ahead and hit that. And this is what it looks like. Brand new, completely online application. It's very exciting. So here's some directions. This does look very long, but this is all of the screens absolutely possible for level 3. So once you say what you need, for example, that you're doing a level 1 application, it will cut out some of these and just skip it for you. So yep, it will save as you go along. I always recommend hitting save draft just in case. So the blue circle indicates where I am. Gray circles means I haven't gotten to these. As we go along, they'll turn black. Now, if, for example, I get to page 10 and I realize I want to go back to page 3, you are able to do that. And these will all then look gray. but it's okay. It doesn't delete your information. It just won't let you jump back all the way to page 10 because some of these questions might be if-then type questions. So you'll just have to go one by one until you get back up there, but you won't lose the information. So at the bottom of the page, most of them look like this: save draft, back, and then next. When you're on the last question page, it will have the option for preview and submit. I recommend you do preview. Make sure you have everything answered, and I'll show you what that looks like before you go ahead and submit. So I have to enter all this information, and I'm just going to be organization ABC. Let's say I am not a new applicant, so we can see all the questions. Now, this social media one, I just want to let you know it's a little finicky about the actual HTTP portions. So just make sure you kind of copy paste it directly from the URL, or if you know it, type it all in. I'm going to put my work office information. And the great part is your computer probably has something similar where you can already have all these addresses saved. So that'll be exciting. So let's say that this is me. Oops. Sure. And this will, so if I didn't fill this out and I tried to hit next, it will show me all the things I still didn't put in. If you're, I assume, if you don't have a CEO, for example, you can just go ahead and enter NA on the required fields. But I assume you have a board chair and president. In this case, I'm going to say it's Mr. Pulmcars. Why not? Oops, let's go here. My typing's not great. And I had to think about that. Okay. Email, I'm just going to put my email for here. At the bottom of this first page, there's a box. So whether you want to receive the contract by email or by physical mail. So in this case, I'm going to say, sure, send it to my email and next, and see that let me go into the next page. So amount of funding I got this year, let's say I got 10,000. This format, it's up to you how precise you enter all these. I do recommend entering commas because otherwise it gets really difficult to read. What was my budget? Let's say that it was $100,000, and obviously put in your actual info. Let's say I did 75,000, and let's say that's, I don't know if these are realistic numbers. So let's see. I'm assuming that's what most people would do. And I select level 1. We went over this. If it exceeds 20% of your budget, go to the next application level. So I hit next. Purpose of the 2022 funding request. It's not showing it right here, but there is a word count for all of these. Usually, I think, if I try to hit next. So some of them you can skip, just don't submit without filling it out. All of the questions are required if they pop up for your level. Just we didn't want to limit, like hold you to one screen when you have other questions that you can still answer. So just make sure you answer all of them before submitting. So the first one is just the purpose of the 2022 funding request. Like, what do you plan to use the funds for? We did talk about what you cannot use the funds for, and that's listed there just for as a reminder. There's a word limit on this one of 500 words. Your organization's mission statement. How does your organization measure impact and success? Also, some of them show that what the limit is and some don't, but once you write something in, it usually says, if you wrote in too much, it'll tell you. But I think this one is, since it's just a copy paste of your mission statement, it shouldn't be too many words. And a pandemic effects summary. We know that the organizations were affected in some way, and there's some more specific questions depending on the level. But in this case, we would like a summary of how you were affected. And for all of these questions, if you want to tell us more, you can attach it as an additional attachment. So, your 501c3 status received, tax identification number, your fiscal year start and end dates, whether I have a surplus or deficit. Let's say I have a surplus and the amount. Here I would update my files. So we did copy paste all the information to help you reference that. We put here what it should be labeled as. Just hit choose file. In my case, I have them all saved here, and I'm looking for my attachment B. And that uploads it right there. This one looks funny, but it does work. Just hit upload file. And there we go. And these were actual files that I just relabeled. And attachment D. And next. I'm just going to save the draft real quick so we can review that. It'll show me that I have it. So if I were to log out, try to go log in again. I go back to application, click back on 2022 funding application, and it'll take me right back to that page I was at. So if I, again, see how these are black and I'm on the blue dot. If I go back, it went all the way back to page 7. So see how 8 and 9 are showing grayed out again, but my files are still in here. Once I hit next, it takes me right back to page 9. So the date of, we asked for the dates on your bylaws, conflict of interest policy, and whistleblower policy. With date of last review, we mean the last time that the organization kind of read through the document and checked that it was still relevant and appropriate for the organization. The date of most recent adoption is when there was changes made and the organization actually voted and adopted a new version of their bylaws. So that info there, same for the conflict of interest policy and for the whistleblower policy. Here's more attachments, and this is what I meant by integrated attachments. Just as you go along, it will prompt you to get those files in there. And whistleblower. All right, so we've usually asked about information about your board members, the number of board members, how many conflict of interest disclosures are collected and up to date, the number of independent directors, and if you're confused about that, just double check the definitions over here. It's like all right in here. And then we're asking about your board demographics, which I believe we started last year. In this case, I know it was confusing last year. Some of it was percentages, some of it was numbers. Now we're asking you to just use whole numbers. Excuse me. All the characteristics are listed alphabetically. I know that we know that sex and gender are not the same thing, nor are ethnicity and race. We are kind of collating them to minimize the number of cells you actually have to fill out. I got a question over here. For the conflict of interest policy, you are supposed to submit the policy itself. Usually we prefer a blank disclosure form, and then the signed or the signature pages for all of your board members and key staff. I know it's one of the larger attachments, but those are supposed to be updated every year. They're supposed to be updated whenever, before a new board member is voted onto the board. And whenever a board member's circumstances change, if they develop a new relationship with that would cause a conflict of interest or appear to be a conflict of interest, we usually recommend that they update that and submit a new version to their board. Okay, so again, or as I mentioned, use whole numbers for ethnicity and race as well. We don't need this to be, we don't expect it to add up because ethnicity and race, sex and gender are not the same thing. We don't expect it to add up. For example, if I was on someone's board, I would be listed under both or they're Hispanic, Black or African American, white, and American Indian. So their numbers wouldn't necessarily make sense as if you try to total them. So we're not concerned about the total exactly, but just the characteristics of the people on your board. We are also asking about the characteristics of your staff, your paid staff, your volunteer info, and then their demographics as well, broken up by leadership position and non-leadership position. We added this question last year. Explain how your organization demonstrates alignment with diversity and inclusion through your staffing, leadership, outreach, and programming decisions. And this is a new question for this year. If your organization has a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, please include it in this space here. We also added this question for level 1. Level 2 and level 3 usually have to provide a whole list of all their programs. For level 1, we're asking just a summary of your organization's overall services and programs, so we get a better idea of what the organization does. And then these questions are from were added last year. How your organization supports racial, economic, and environmental justice. We know that there is that these are big systemic topics and that no one organization is going to be able to do everything. Just tell us how your organization supports them. I have a question over here. The question is whether there's a way for the applicants to view the full list of questions. Unfortunately, it doesn't come out in a good format. So I just recommend that the organizations go through the application. Remember, you can save this, go back and forth as many times as you need to. We've asked before, population served. We are asking that you provide the source of your numbers, whether it's ticket sales or website visits or whatever it is that you use. Please let us know how you got those numbers. If you have the demographic information like age, geographic location, all of that would be very interesting for the board to be able to review. So if you have that information, please include it. And do note differences with pre-pandemic conditions. We know that a lot of organizations had to pivot completely to online services or weren't able to provide the same services, or their physical locations were closed down. Just let us know what the main differences were. And we're basically on the last page already. This shows up for every organization or every level of application. You can type in some information in here if you like. We do recommend providing details on anything that's a big change, especially if it's not related to the pandemic, because we kind of asked about that. But if there was a change that's not related to the pandemic, like you're looking for a new location and that's why some things are different, whatever it may be, you can let us know here, up to 250 words. If it's going to take you more than that, feel free to upload the additional attachment. So regardless of how you compose the attachment, whether it's an Excel or a Word doc or a JPEG, whatever it may be, make sure you save it as a PDF. You should be able to do so through your computer. If you right click, do print, it should show you an option to save as PDF. If you have Adobe on your computer, like an Adobe Pro or something, it'll also show like an Adobe option. And if not, we usually recommend smallpdf.com or similar websites where you can just basically pick any of these and be able to, like, if you want to change your, let's see. Well, anyways, if you want to change it, but even if you just Google Word to PDF, it'll usually find some option to convert that for you. And then you upload it. So here's where it's a little different. I can go previous, preview, or submit, or save my draft at this point. I can do that and continue working on it. So if I hit preview, it'll show you this. And you can see the font is a little different. So the question is a little darker and larger than the response. And you can see all my answers here, my blanks. So this, unfortunately, it won't show you the questions that are missing. So I do recommend going back through and making sure you fill out all the questions. And then you can submit. That's it. And you should receive an email, which I'm pretty sure I'll receive to my email in just a minute. And that wraps up our live demo in record time, I think. Does anyone have any questions? I think I'm gonna unmute people, hopefully. I'm not sure
That was record time, Mary Ellie, so very good.
Oh, let me change my, actually, I'll leave this screen on in case anyone wants to ask a question about a particular section. How easy, okay, a question, how easy is it to print a preview for review of a hard copy? It's super easy, just like I was, all right. Oh no, hold on, let me see if I can pull up my submitted version instead of having to refill all this. So, no, that's not it. Ah, here we go. So once I went back in, it says you already have submitted this web form, view your previous submission. All right, so here's all of my answers, right click, print. And that's usually where I would print or save as PDF. I think your browser usually has an option to print directly from the side too, instead of right click, but that's really your best bet. Like also took up 5 pages. Although, of course, it would have shown more. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Question. We applied last year as a new organization, but didn't receive funding. Yes, we recommended, I believe, all new organizations that were eligible for funding but not everything makes it onto the adopted budget, unfortunately. Your chances for new funding for new organizations to get funding in 2022, I would say are probably better than 2021. Usually new organizations didn't have problem getting funding in prior years. It's just COVID was an odd one. All right, next question. What do we do if we are unsure of funding that we might receive in 2022? For example, due to the pandemic, my organization did not receive funding in 2020 or 2021 from a town government. And don't know if they'll receive that funding in 2022, which, yeah, I understand. Should we only include guaranteed funding amounts in our 2022 budgets? I would say yes, only committed amounts. I also sometimes prefer if organizations don't use their Erie County request as part of balancing their budget, because although we were very lucky this year that funding was awarded, I would be concerned if the organization wasn't able to make it because something happened with the county funding. So I would say use only amounts that you are certain that you are going to get, or, you know, I know something like ticket sales or whatever may be are always a little fluctuating. They're not 100% certain, but just your best, as certain as you can. To follow up, as someone who did not receive funding in this past year as a new organization, should they apply as a new applicant? I would say yes. Usually the questions that apply to a new applicant, or that apply to non-new applicants to prior applicants would be regarding county recognition and responses to the feedback letters. So I think you can apply as a new applicant if you applied this year but didn't receive funding.
I would agree.
Yeah. Well, I will hang on here for a while. We have 6 minutes till 7, and I even booked this whole thing for 2 hours just in case. So I will definitely stay on a little longer. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. If you are ready to log off, just feel free to contact us. My email and phone number are on the screen. Just know I can't really answer my phone number unless I'm in the office, which is currently only on Tuesdays. But if you leave a voicemail, I am able to receive it and I can reply by email. So email is the best way, but leave me a message if not. And pretty much all the information is on Erie.gov/cultural. Oh, you know what? I forgot to. I just realized. Here we go. Now my information is on the screen. So yeah, my phone number, email, and our website. Pretty much all the info you need for the application is on the website. If you're not sure, I would recommend contacting ASI. They know all the things. And if not, then contact me. And we'll set you up. And if anyone has any questions. Oh, someone has a question. How will we submit additional forms such as strategic plan and other docs not required of level 1? For that, I would recommend submitting them as one attachment, as attachment Z for the additional info. If you want, like, if your strategic plan and some narrative, just try to see if you can combine it all into one file, which usually I do on that website, like smallpdf.com or something like that. And yeah, submit it as attachment C. If you do have information like that you would like to share for everyone, the strategic plan is always great to see. So if you have it, feel free to submit it. We love reading them. And any other information as well. Question. If we did better in 2020 than in 2019, must we use 2019 budget info in your requests given these circumstances? For the sake of uniformity in our request, I would recommend doing the 2019 actual for everyone, but feel free to tell us how you managed to do better in 2020 than in 2019. We really want to know how the organizations were able to pivot, right, Graham?
Absolutely, please. And again, I mean, back to the strategic plan, but even this, if you feel that there's something that would be important for the board to know, or the reviewer to know, or the county to know, by all means, please submit additional information that you're not actually being asked for. And again, that through the process that Marielle just said about uploading an attachment. And I would be very interested in hearing about how 2020 ended up being better financially than in 19 did. Just given everything that's going on, I think that's really quite a thing. So yes, by all means, I know we're only asking for some things, particularly at this level. There's more that's asked of level 2 and level 3 applicants. But if you have, like you said, if you have a strategic plan, or you have something that's not being asked of you, but you think it's important for us to see because you think it speaks to the health or the organization's going in the right direction, or how you handled the pandemic, anything like that, by all means, please feel free to submit that as well as an additional attachment. Absolutely.
Another question. For demographic info, if people fit into more than one category, do we count them as one in each appropriate category, or as a half or a quarter or the like in each appropriate category? I would say go with whole numbers in this case. Yeah. Like I said, don't worry about it not adding up. Like if you have 15 board members and you end up with like 20, if you add up all the categories, that's okay.
Yeah,
We're not concerned about it matching perfectly, just that we see what is represented on your board or your key staff, your employees, etc.
right.
All right, a question. Is there a question list anywhere outside of the actual application portal? Unfortunately, no, that's what I was saying, that it doesn't print out well. I will see after the applicant briefings, I will see if I can somehow like copy them and make them into a file, but I can't promise that that will come back to you in any sort of like timely way.
Mhm.
So it's just about 7.
The other questions? Other questions that people have now? I mean, again, as Mary Ellie said, please feel free to submit more if you think about them after the fact. But any for the benefit of everyone in the group, any other questions? Thank you very much for all of your time. There will be another for level 2 and level 3 the next 2 days, same time, 6 p.m. So if you know of another organization that may not have thought about joining and is going to be looking for or asking for higher dollar amounts in level 1 application can submit, by all means, please let them know. And certainly if you're interested yourself after hearing this and thinking that you might ask for more, by all means, you're welcome to join us tomorrow and or Thursday as well. So again, thank you very much for your time, and again, bearing with us, given it's not really doesn't lend itself necessarily to question and answers, but I think Mary Ellie did a great job, so I want to congratulate her. Thank you so much, and again, thank you all for logging in.
Thank you, everyone. I did get one last question, was this good point that I forgot to mention. Where do you get a recorded copy of the presentation? I will be making it into a file, and I will put it on the erie.gov/cultural under resources. There's usually the prior year's briefings. We'll have the PowerPoint and the recorded version on there. So thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.